And we're live. I am so sorry to everyone on the stream. I did not have the mic ready. It almost felt too good that I was that prepared. So now that we're back, I will start again from the beginning. I apologize. So let me kick off again. If you've tuned in before to any of the talks that I've given in the past, I like to do a couple of different things. Today we're going to cover preservation in Esther, and in order to do that, I like to go over who wrote the book, the context of it historically, the types of literary styles, the key themes, the structure of the book, and the topics that are covered, as well as just definitions to make sure that we're all on the same page when we're learning about this book together. So after that, too, as I mentioned, I'll go over the key themes, and then we'll reflect on a couple of the major points that have to do with preservation itself. And any questions that you guys have along the way, please feel free to just stop me and keep it as an open discussion. It's not very formal. I'm happy to take questions and comments throughout. So just to give a little bit of historical context, the book of Esther takes place post-exile of the Jewish community in Susa, Persia. We have four main characters that we're going to be looking at today, which is Esther, Mordecai, King Xerxes, and Haman, which I'll go over who each of those are in more detail. And then the key themes, as I mentioned, was the title of the talk is preservation in Esther, but there's also providence as well. So we'll talk about the definition of that and how that plays a role in this book also. So we don't exactly know who wrote the book of Esther. We are not sure who the author is. We don't really have any guesses as well, so that is kind of left up to interpretation. It's also, fun fact, the only book in the Bible that does not mention God explicitly. So that is purposeful. I think the author has done that in a way to be able to illustrate to us that while not actively mentioning God and highlighting that he is there, the actions and the events that take place clearly state to us that he is there. So if you guys tuned in a couple of weeks ago, we talked about wars in Joshua. That is a perfect example of God actually being present within all of the activities and the conversations of the events that took place at that time. This is almost like the exact reversal of that. So we'll see two sides of how God has managed these historical events over the course of the Old Testament. So, as I mentioned, it takes place during the Persian Empire between the late 5th century and 4th century BCE. It's mostly narrative with some like discourse sections that we'll talk about. And there's a couple of key themes, about 3 that we'll talk about. So the reversal of faith, we'll see a couple of different examples throughout the entire book of where an event takes place. And then the exact opposite of that event reverses the course of action and the course of history. So we'll go over those through each of the series of events of the book. We'll also talk about the commitment that God had to Israel during this time and his commitment to the people and protecting them, which is the preservation aspect of it. And overall, the overarching theme is an invitation to trust God in general, no matter if we hear his voice actively or it's not explicitly mentioned. So Esther is divided into 4 parts. Chapters 1 and 2 describe Esther's coronation and how she rose to power, how she came to be in the position that she's in. 3 to 6 go over Haman's plot to kill the king and Mordecai's rise to power. So we'll talk about Haman and Mordecai and the role that they played and who they were to each other. 7 to 8 are about Haman's demise and the deliverance of the Jewish people. And chapters 9 and 10 talk about the liberation and the celebration of the events that took place after this all fizzled out. Make sense so far? Any questions? Any thoughts? Great. So 1, what is preservation? I'm going to throw it back to everybody here. When we think of the word preservation, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Keeping something as it was. What else? protecting something. So not only making sure it stays the way that it was intended to stay, but protecting it from something that may do it harm or change the way that it was meant to be or meant to manifest. Now, what about providence? What do we think of when we think of providence? What do we mean by land? I can also, by the way, I can also repeat anything you guys say if you don't get a chance to grab the mic. I'm happy to just also reiterate it. Don't worry about it.
When it comes to land, I think of the structures, the
Yes, you're not wrong. There's provincial land. There's like provincial physical experience, but there's also providence also means the guardianship of something, like the protection of something through a deity, through a religious deity. So yes, that is there's a couple of different interpretations of it. The one that we want to stick to today is the protection from a deity, the intervention from a deity. So when we talk about it, when we say God's providence, that's his like interjection into the story and his guardianship and his care over the people, his providence over the people. Sorry, his preservation over the people. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay. So with those two definitions out there, we all have a clear understanding of what providence and preservation are. So when I use them throughout the story, that's how we're going to apply them throughout the different books. Let's dive in. So as I mentioned before, it's broken up into 4 parts. We'll go through the first part. So Esther 1 and 2 talks about how Esther becomes the queen. The story kicks off. I should also preface that the entire book of Esther is not exactly one that's peppered with a lot of moral code. It is one that consistently highlights drinking and partying and all of these things that we would not initially think of when God is interceding and participating in some sort of grandiose plan and interjection. So the fact that all of this is taking place when we hear so many of these like raunchy things taking place just shows the focus shouldn't be on that. We are really focusing in on the events that are taking place to protect and to preserve that nation. Regardless of what was going on outside, the goal of it was to do those 2 things. Does that make sense? So that may come up as you're thinking about it, because you'll hear throughout the tale, like the way we kick it off, the whole story of Esther begins with this like 187-day banquet that took place where King Xerxes was basically showing off his wealth. And it's not like exactly what you would think, right? A sit-down formal party. It's probably filled with all of the hard things that you could possibly imagine that we've heard before and in the Old Testament. So it was really just a display of valor from him and the splendor of his kingdom. So in one of these drunken states, basically he commands his wife to come out to like show off her beauty. He just wants to put her on display. So she refuses, and he goes off. He's in a drunken rage. He makes a decree, this crazy decree, that all Persian men should be the masters of their own home. And it was just like a reaction of his bruised ego, essentially. He was just so mad that his wife chose not to obey him. So his reaction, obviously like anybody would react, right? Just go search for a new wife. Duh. Like, why would I not? Just like send out a search party for a new wife. So, you know, I'm joking a little bit about it, but it's just to show you like how quickly things escalate and how quickly God will crush them, right? So he basically holds a beauty pageant, and he calls all the beautiful women in the kingdom to come and put on this beauty pageant. The goal is to replace the queen. And here comes Esther. Esther enters into the story now. He's wowed by her beauty. He's enamored by her. He decides she's going to be the new queen. She, as you guys are maybe a little familiar, she's now hiding her true identity. I think she probably walked into this not thinking that it was going to go this way, but Jews were not in favor of the kingdom at the time. So now she's entering the kingdom, hiding who she really is. So at this point, we're introduced to Esther, who wins this beauty pageant of sorts, I should call, and Mordecai, who is her cousin, and who also serves as her guardian. So naturally, as Esther is chosen and she enters the kingdom, Mordecai comes with her as her guardian and her protector. He stays close to her. He is shadowing her just to protect her because he knows her true identity and his true identity. And in his shadowing, then we see the shift of where the story really starts to escalate. So now we know Esther's living in hiding. She's hiding her identity, just keeping everything quiet, trying to keep it low. Mordecai, by chance, now hears a plot to kill the king. And this is where the story gets crazy. Did you have your hand up? Yes.
She joined.
My understanding at the time in reading this, I don't think the women had a choice, to be honest. I think they were all sourced out of their homes. They were chosen and brought to the kingdom. I don't really think it was a choice, to be honest. I could be wrong. Somebody can correct me, but it was not exactly an optional thing. Cousins. Mm-hmm. Yep. And he was served as her guardian. So I also understand that Esther had no family. I'm not entirely sure what the story is, to be honest, of like her family relations necessarily, but he served as her guardian and her protector. Any other questions? Good. Okay. So now enter Mordecai. He hears this plot to kill the king. And before we get into the plot to kill the king and how that escalates, this is an example of divine providence. Now, we talked about the definition of providence earlier. While God, again, is not explicitly mentioned, the narration suggests that there's some sort of provincial order taking place, that something is watching over the series of events that are happening. The rise of Esther into queenship and this discovery of the plot to kill the king kind of sets that pace to say, like, how all these series of events seem to be clocking in at the right times, at the right places. There must be a reason why. Yeah? Is this better? Maybe it's a little low. Could we? Yeah. Oh, this is a little hard to do. Do you mind if I swap out a mic? Hello? Hello? Is that better? Okay, let's try this. All right, somebody give me the cue on the live stream if this is not as effective. I'm happy to stop and reassess what's going on here. Okay, so now we're starting to get the sense that things are about to unfold. Something is happening. Something is stirring. That's chapters 1 and 2. That's the crux of the laying of the groundwork of the story. Now let's move on to 3 to 6. So chapters 3 and 6 cover the plot to kill the king from Haman and Mordecai's rise. So now we learn a lot more about those two characters in detail. We meet Haman. He's an Agagite, which is a descendant of the ancient Canaanites. So it's a sect of the Jews. The king elevates Haman to the highest position of the kingdom. He is in the king's circle. He elevates him incredibly high. He commands everyone to kneel before him. However, Mordecai refuses to bow. And this is where things get very tense. Somehow, Haman discovers that Mordecai is Jewish, and this enrages him even more. So he won't bow. He's Jewish. So he convinces now the king to issue a decree to destroy all the Jews. Now, there's a couple of things here. This is happening. I think if we take a step back, I feel like if I had to make an assumption, The king may have not set out that order if he understood that Esther, who he was enamored with, was also Jewish, right? This reaction came from not understanding the link that he has to the Jewish community. So it was like a reaction. Of course, Haman, whatever you say, you're my highest counsel. Of course, we'll do whatever you say. Now, how the day of the death of the Jews was chosen is one of the most important points of the story as well. So I want to focus in on that. Does anybody know how they just chose the day that that would take place? Anybody know the context or the story behind that? Yeah. So Haman went to King Xerxes and was like, we should wipe them out. King Xerxes said yes, and they had to decide when that was going to happen. So Haman was infuriated that Mordecai wouldn't bow to him, and because he wouldn't bow to him, it led him to want to kill all of the Jews. I don't know how we go from that to that, but it enraged him so much that he went back to King Xerxes and he said, I want to send out a decree to kill all the Jews, and just built all of this like horrible story around how the Jewish community should be killed. And then after that, they had to choose a day to kill the Jews. Right. There is a die that's called die like dice, called pur. They rolled this dice. Yes, they rolled this dice, and what it landed on would be the day that they would choose to annihilate the Jews. So that's how they determined that would be when that would happen. Keep that in the back of your mind. That's how the initial decree was set out. So naturally, this caused a lot of stress among the Jews. Mordecai is now mourning publicly. He is he's losing it. Naturally, this has now led to a series of events that nobody ever estimated would happen. Yes, it wasn't an immediate decree, so this is important as well. So they waited a very long time before this was going to take place. It wasn't a tomorrow effort, which is probably relevant as well because it took all this time for all of these events to unfold and to lead to the eventual save of the Jewish people. Mm-hmm. So to iterate what Amanda said, they rolled it on the first month, and for those on the stream, so they rolled it on the first month, and it basically dictated that on the 11th month, so almost a year later, that this would take place. So that's important to note that this story took place over the course of a year. This was the build up and the development over that time. So Mordecai is mortified. Esther finds out. She's informed of the situation. And Mordecai begs her to intervene. He needs her to get involved with the king and diffuse the situation. And this is not an easy ask. As we know, Esther is hiding her identity. Nobody knows that she's Jewish. This decree just went out. That should include her in theory. So this is really such a big ask for Mordecai to even put out. And Esther knows the gravity of the ask, right? This is where we hear the famous words, if I perish, I perish. She just doesn't care at this point because she knows now she has this responsibility to take care of her people. So we see also a shift in Esther. Esther has been kind of a little bit behind the scenes. She's been playing the part. She didn't really want to be there. But now she understands she has a role and a responsibility to kick in. So then we really start to see Esther's courage grow and like Haman's like atrocity come to life. So after they have that conversation, Mordecai and Esther, like, Esther, you have to do something. Esther says, I will. I don't care what happens to me. The king has a restless night of sleep. So you'll hear about that in one of the sections. I should go back. Sorry, 1 second. So he has a restless night of sleep because he's reminded of an event that takes place earlier, which I'm sorry I forgot to mention. After we learn about the plot to kill the king, Mordecai lets the king know, and Mordecai is very thankful. Sorry, the king is very thankful to Mordecai, and he honors him and he elevates him and thanks him for that. Which is incredibly important because this also infuriates Haman even more, because previously he's tried to degrade him and bring him down and kill him for not bowing to him. But now we're going to see the reverse of the king has this restless night. He's remembering that Mordecai saved his life by telling him about this plot. And now he wants to honor Mordecai publicly. Obviously, this is going to upset Haman. So now we see a reversal of the fortunes. Haman originally tried to bring down Mordecai. Mordecai survived that and was able to come out of that. And now the king is reversing the role and honoring Mordecai for that moment in time. Does that make sense? Yes. Who, Mordecai? Haman, yes. Haman was part of it, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. And because, actually, hold on one second. Let me confirm that. Was kill him? I don't. Yes, it was. So he overheard people talking. It was set out by Haman to do that. And because Mordecai fumbled it, Haman was upset. So because of that, he wanted to get out and basically go after Mordecai. It was unsuccessful. And then now the tables are turning on him. That makes sense now? Okay. Apologies. That major point also is very important, so we'll come back to it. Any other questions or thoughts before I keep going? They tried to kill the king. They weren't successful. Yep. Yes. So now he remembers Mordecai's act of loyalty. And here's where it gets very interesting. Haman is forced to order to honor Mordecai. Now he is forced to kneel and to thank him for saving the king's life, something Haman would have never wanted to do because originally, A, he wanted to kill the king. B, he is not a fan of Mordecai because he is a Jew. So, and he has basically tried to bring him down. So now the reverse is happening where he has to honor this man that he tracked down, and that also is basically taking him down. Yes, he was. He was. Sorry, I missed that detail. Super important, my God. If you would think, but there's not a lot of honorable action in this story. There's a lot of so the question that was posed, you would think that after finding out that somebody in his kingdom tried to plot and kill him, that he would just try to pluck that out and gut it where it is. But there was not a lot of honorable action happening. We see there was a lot of series of events that were transpiring that may not have been very logical, but the only logical thread is every time something did transpire against the Jews, the reverse came out to save the Jews from it. That's the only thing really that's making sense throughout all of this. With every evil peril, there was always a positive that came out of it. What other questions? Anything else?
So just to clarify, did the king know that Haman
Yes.
was after him? Haman himself?
I don't believe so, no, because this is now all happening behind the scenes. Because obviously, I think if he really, really knew, my understanding of King Xerxes is that he wasn't exactly the most wonderful fella, and we see that he's very drunk in many of the verses, and there's a lot of drinking, splendor, and all of that stuff. So my understanding is that no, there was no clear link for him between Haman and the plot, but it was this secret between almost Haman and Mordecai. I'm almost sure you were behind this, and I know you are the one who fumbled this for me. So, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Again, anybody correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm misstating the series of events. It's like a soap opera. That's why it really we're hooked into it, right? Yes.
But it makes sense what you're saying, where even though the king might not have known that Haman was a part of it, Haman would have been really, really upset that now he has to bow, because he's like, I was trying to get rid of the king first. That didn't, like, that's still not going to work. And then on top of that, I have to bow to someone that I feel like I'm superior to, if I'm understanding correctly.
Yes, absolutely. And actually, even a step further, if I'm not mistaken, earlier on, Haman tried to execute Mordecai using some sort of spoke that he put out, and he set out to like bring down Mordecai that way. But the series of events unfolded where now Mordecai's being honored, so his death did not come. We'll see. I feel like I'm spoiling this, but we'll read this. But essentially, we see the end of Haman happen on that same spoke that he set out for Mordecai. So the series of events lead us eventually to the fate that he set out for others was eventually landed for him. Wild. This is great. I won't repeat that on the stream, but yes, it does feel like a movie is unfolding. I won't say which movie, but yes, it does, right? It's important to see the thread between all of the actions and what actually transpired. So and that who was trying to kill Mordecai. Yes. 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 There's a from my understanding, Haman and Mordecai, it's a clear we don't like each other. Yeah, clear hatred. It's weird. Okay, Haman and the king, Haman is being one way in front of the king and another way behind his back. So that is like the betrayal side of the story. And there's a clear discord between Haman and Mordecai. Wow, I didn't really think we'd spend so much time on their like dramatic relationship. I would have like dug into that a lot more. I know. This is crazy. So yes, very complicated relationship between the two. The king has a sleepless night. He's all of a sudden reminded, I love Mordecai. Again, we see this orchestration that is happening. Maybe orchestration is not the right word, but we see this series of events again that are unraveling, and the bravery of Esther really coming to light. So now it's up to Esther. And we're going to move on to chapters 7 through 8. It's up to Esther to deliver the Jews and take down Haman in the process, whether by intention or by default it happens. So Esther decides to host a banquet for the king and Haman. Everybody loves banquets in this story. We love a good party, but they really loved a good party. I don't know if it's necessarily good, but they loved a party. So it's I believe a couple of days, if I'm not mistaken, 2. The second day, Esther reveals her Jewish identity, and that's when she exposes the plot that Haman had to kill, to murder her and Mordecai. So Esther does not reveal that Haman wanted to kill the king, but she reveals to the king, he wanted to kill me, who you love, and Mordecai also, who you love. So she flipped the tables, right? Without having to even say that there was a plot against you by this guy. This is now, ironically, the downfall of Haman, because now the king is thinking, like, he tried to take down 2 people that I really care about. So maybe it really doesn't matter if they're Jewish at the end of the day, because it's still 2 people I've grown to love and be fond of, and they've tried to protect me. So the king, in a drunken rage again, we hear about another drunken fit that he has, he orders that Haman be executed. So in a drunken rage, he sets that out. Again, as I mentioned, on this very same stake that he wanted Mordecai to be murdered on. So the irony is, we get back to that in chapter 7 through 8. And then this is the downfall of Haman. Now, however, the story doesn't end there. You would think that after we take down Haman, everybody is safe, the decree goes away. That's not true. It doesn't nullify the decree. They have to still find a way, I guess legally is probably the wrong word. They have to find a way to reverse the edict that was set out to destroy the Jews. you can't revoke a decree at the time, so you can write a new one and counteract it. So now Mordecai and Esther have to kind of figure out how to switch the tables now. The new decree permits the Jews to defend themselves against anyone who would attack them that day. So now we spent 11 months. There's probably some sort of campaigning that took place that this is going to happen on this day. The decree then just allows them to protect themselves on that day. So the event still doesn't go away, but it gives the Jewish people empowerment to safeguard themselves. Any questions so far before we close in? Yes?
For the Jews, would they, if that like opposing decree didn't happen where they say you can defend yourself on this day, culturally, would they have not defended themselves? Like, I would expect that you would have just already defended yourself if someone was coming, or was it more like, pay attention, this day is coming? Let me know if that makes sense.
It does make sense. So I'm not entirely sure. I think if I have to make an assumption, I don't know any historical context of whether or not the Jews would have gone up in arms and defended themselves. If anybody has any insight into that, please share. I would imagine just human nature, there is some sort of defense mechanism that may go up. The difficulty behind this is that the decree was for total annihilation. It's very hard to fight a total annihilation, especially if maybe you're outnumbered by an entire kingdom that is vaster, has an army, and has a decree to complete a task of annihilation, right? So even then, the odds are still looking pretty slim, right? So they are empowered to defend themselves, and within the process of defending themselves, they start to deconstruct and take down parts of the kingdom that were already bad actors. So they have now eliminated those who have set out against them, those who are down to take down the king, Haman's family, all of this stuff. So they've kind of like now rid the kingdom of all of the bad actors, as I mentioned. So these final chapters really now tie in the providence theme that we had talked about, and justice. So we see the plot overturned. We see the Jewish people saved through the actions of Esther and Mordecai, and we're reminded again of the deliverance. We talked about that being one of the themes. This is, while everything seemed like it was stacked up against them, everything that took place was still a small reversal of the events that took place 11 months prior. So any questions before I move on to the last couple of chapters? Last two, 9 and 10. Okay. 9 and 10 now is the triumph and the celebration. So they're celebrating their victory over their enemies. The decreed day arrives, and they defend themselves. Everything goes well. Again, as I mentioned, they destroyed his family. This is any of the officials who were also in on the plot to kill the king, as I mentioned. So all of that goes down in the last couple of chapters. Now, as I mentioned to you before, how was the day chosen? Pour the dice. That was chosen. To commemorate this day and the reversal and the rescue, they established an annual 2-day feast called Purim to honor this. Until this day, it is known as like a time of joy and celebration where the Jews were delivered from this time. So the irony of how their fate was chosen in the beginning becomes their honor and their celebration where they commemorate that time. I think it was March 23rd to 24th. When is Purim? Let me just double check. It was March 23rd and 24th of this year. So any questions before I wrap up into preservation and providence? No? Okay. So there's 4 different ways that we see preservation and providence rise, mostly preservation I'll cover. One is preservation through divine providence, preservation against Haman's plot, preservation through the reversal of fortunes, and preservation of Jewish identity and tradition. So the first one, preservation through divine providence, we see two things take place that are incredibly important that really define this. As we mentioned, God's name is not explicitly mentioned, but his hand is very evident throughout it. We see that through Esther's ascension to queen. She's taken out from her village, brought to the kingdom, rises to power, becomes queen, and takes over in a very short period of time through a very interesting series of events. And then Mordecai's discovery of the plot. That's the second one. So him discovering the plot shows his loyalty to the king. It shows his dedication to the kingdom, and it enters him into this light of salvation, essentially, in the eyes of the king, which is preserving his life and eventually, ultimately, preserving the life of the Jews. So that's preservation through the divine providence. The second one is the preservation against Haman's plot to kill the king. So first, there's two things. So first, he has a decree set out to destroy the Jews. So he convinces the king to do this on a specific day, which it threatens the very existence of the entire Jewish community at that time. And the reversal of that, which is Esther's intervention, her courageousness to approach the king, revealing her identity and appealing to him on behalf of her people. So her bravery is very strategic. The timing is very important because his favor allows the second decree. So while, Haman was so convincing to have him set out the first decree, her plea was stronger to have him set out the second decree to save them. So we see that, the preservation against the plot to kill the Jewish community. We talked a lot about reversing the events that have taken place. So number 3 is the preservation through reversal of fortunes. We see 3 things here. Mordecai's honor, that's an obvious one. We went from Haman wanting Mordecai to honor him to, Haman being so upset that he wouldn't, to wanting to kill him, to Mordecai eventually being forced to be honored by the king for Haman to honor him. So this diminishes Haman's influence. We see that he goes from a place of power. We think in the beginning of the story that he's got the kingdom in his hands. He could just convince the king to do whatever. But Mordecai's honor eventually prevails and reverses on him. We do see in the second point, too, Haman's downfall. So the plot backfires. So his initial intent to set out and to destroy the king really just set way for Mordecai to be elevated. So his negative intentions just paved the way for Mordecai to also pave the way for Esther. So those series of events brought us back to what the original intention was to protect and to preserve the Jewish people. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if anybody else has the answer for this. If Esther was, her identity was revealed broadly, I may be making a fair assumption, and somebody could correct me if I'm wrong. After the series of events take place, it must have come out. It's fair to say, if I'm not mistaken. She told him during one of the banquets, during the with the banquet attendees, but did it go out to the land afterwards? Did it trickle down to the rest of the nation? I would presume so. I don't know if it's explicitly mentioned, though. Again, anybody can chime in if they feel like that detail is out there that I'm not really sure about. But definitely at the banquet, it has come out. I should also mention, I think my understanding of the banquet was not as large and as elaborate as the ones that the kings were hosting, but still had a number of people at them, if I'm not mistaken. Again, someone correct me if I'm wrong. And then finally, on the reversal of fortunes is the second decree. that came out to reverse the entire set of activities that really the decree had been out for 11 months. It was impossible to see the end of it, right? Ending any other way. So the Jewish victory and the reversal of that original decree is another way where we see that fortune coming back in their favor and them securing their survival. And lastly, it's the preservation of the Jewish identity and tradition. So the irony behind Pur, the die that was rolled to determine their fate is now used as a way to commemorate the series of events that took place and their protection and their preservation during that time. So it's a celebration and it's an honor. Something that was seen as a death sentence is now seen as something that's favorable and provides them comfort that they were able to survive and maintain their identity. So it's preservation. It's exactly preservation. I think we should be careful when using the words like predetermined destiny or it's a portrayal of God's active work behind the scenes. I mentioned at the beginning, Joshua was an active display of God being there and really being the master that managed all of the events and that really led the charge with all of the wars and intervened on behalf of the people. This is an example of God working behind the scenes and protecting the community through a series of events where at one point it may look like it's not going to be in their favor. It always was in their favor because of the groundwork that he laid to eventually protect them. His ultimate goal was to ensure the people and their identity. We talk about the Jewish identity quite a bit and protecting that and preserving that. This is just another example of how he safeguarded that. Questions or thoughts? Objections? Happy to take those as well.
A thought that I have, which it doesn't need to be like answered fully, but
I might not have the answer, so
yeah.
it may not be answered fully.
I just don't really, it's a hard one. It's one of those like, well, who knows? But do you think that if Esther decided not to be courageous, God would have found another way to preserve the Jewish people? Or would we say that like he would have just found another way to make Esther like to include her? And I guess it doesn't really matter. The idea is more about like they were always protected, but like how do like what if, like what is that, where does that place the providence? Anyway, you catch my drift.
Yeah, I find that sometimes it gets a little tricky when we do the what if scenarios, because it's more important to focus on the goal than how we got there. And the goal was to protect the Jewish identity. And that is what happened. And his objective was to safeguard his people. And no matter what, that was going to happen. And another example, Jonah. No matter what, it was his intention that Jonah was going to go to Nineveh. That was it. That was the goal. Didn't matter how it was going to happen. It was going to happen, right? So I firmly believe it's more important to focus on what is God's intention, what is he trying to achieve, and how he gets there. We can speculate. We can really tear ourselves up. And I think that could be slightly dangerous because creating all these scenarios, that is what happened. And this is what we should be focusing on because it can get a little cagey otherwise.
So God chooses instruments to, so the Esther becomes an instrument to change the goal of God.
Yes.
So whatever is, as you said, whatever is in the midst of making that happen, it's just to
Yes, we are.
That's why we don't have to take so much ego when we help in a situation, because if we're just all humble instruments.
We're humble instruments. I like that you added the word humble instruments because sometimes when we think of the word instrument, we don't want to think of puppeteers either. I don't think he set us out to be like these. Yeah, exactly. He's not using us, but we are humble instruments and participants in the eventual goal of protecting and preserving all peoples, right? This is not just the Jewish identity. Yeah. Absolutely. Like we would all be honored to be a part of the end goal of preservation. Really, the entire theme of I think why we exist is preservation of peoples. It's just really safeguarding us and our identity, not just the Jewish identity. It's just our Christian identity. So to be a part of that, I think is absolutely beautiful. Other questions or thoughts? Don't ask me more questions about the drama between Mordecai and Esther and all these characters. I'm glad there's only 4 characters because if there was any more, I would have to like put like a diagram or a chart. There, I mean, a couple years ago it was a play. It was the Sights and Sounds. They did that whole thing, yeah. But they didn't get into the drama of the filial relationships and all of these things. They skipped over the soap opera portion of it. There is a movie? Oh, no way. For those at home and those here, tune into the movie as well. Okay, we'll find the name of the movie. Maybe we'll post it in the comment. Okay, yeah. I wouldn't say after listening to this talk, maybe go like check that one for accuracy and compare notes. There's probably room left up for interpretation in the movie. Any other questions or thoughts before we close?
Well, I kind of want to say one thing.
Okay, please, Mike, thank you.
Just to touch upon this and intervene. I know that God uses us. Now, if you're not willing to do the work, you'll find someone else to step in and do it for you. You know, there's going to be a time that, like, although, like you did mention Jonah. Jonah he signed up. It was like, signing up for the Marines. He's a Marine. He's in there. He's on the battlefield. And then he decides to turn around and run. That's a different story. But, like, because he was already, like, going for the mission, he had to do what he had to do. And God was going to force him to do it. But if someone else were, like, let's say someone besides Jonah were in the story. And, and he didn't sign up and he wasn't doing well, then they'll find someone else.
I think the story is it's 2 things, and anybody feel free to add in. The story is what is God's goal? Whether we understand it or not, that's fine. What is he trying to show us? I think the person plays a part in it. It's not the only part, though. I do think we see all of these people in the Bible who really emulate us in a lot of ways. Like they're not these like random figments of our imagination. They are reflections of real people and real emotions and real fear and character, right? So it is part and parcel, I think, to do with the person who is chosen in the story that's to be told about the person. However, I do feel like it is more productive. Anyone can, if you have a different opinion, that's also okay. I think it's more important to focus on what is he trying to achieve? What is it that we're trying to learn from what he wants to do? Because at the end of the day, if we understand what it is that he's trying to do, that's easier than to consume, personalities or people. God is unwavering and he's pretty straightforward, but people are complex. Probably for no reason most of the time, right? So God is not. God is a simple God. He is not overly complicated. We are the complicated ones. So it's easier to put your faith and trust in something that's a lot more solid and straightforward, like him and his intentions, versus personalities, which are wavering. Okay, last one. Can you put the mic on? If you, yeah, let's just do a mic. Thank you.
It's in connection with this. Yeah, I totally agree with what you said, that it's not a random that he chooses a particular person to play a
Mhm.
role in the situation. For instance, in the case of Jonas, it reflects so much our tendency to make judgments
Mhm.
because he was thinking, oh, these people are hopeless and it's not worth going there. And he was making all these, judgment and predetermined thoughts about what should be instead of being open to leaving his ego on the side. And that's part of our human nature. And
Which is
it's
why we can't focus on putting things into the human nature, more so what is God
right, right.
intending
But
to
at the
do
same time,
first.
when we read that, we do identify with those people. We do understand because we are like that, human beings.
Mhm.
So I think it's important, and it's, as I said, it's not a random that he did all those things because we are learning through the process.
Yeah.
The importance of faith also, because he didn't have faith in accomplishing this. He thought it's worthless.
I will agree with that, and I was. I
And
will
also,
say,
it's like discriminative because he said they are not even Jews. So, all those things
Yeah.
that we do, that we are better than the other because we are different and all that. So I think we learn a lot through that process.
I
Also.
think we do. We learn a lot through his intention, the people he chooses, and the transformation that people go through as well. You see a lot of transformations in the scriptures. So, um, yes, while absolutely there nothing is done at random. There is a lesson in it, but we should be cautious of the what ifs because it's already happened. It's already been written about. It's there. But it's okay for us to look and say, I relate to, or I don't relate to, or I don't understand, and I want to know why. So that's also okay. Did you get the name of the movie of Esther? There are several. Well, we all have a lot of watching to do this weekend. I'll close it out there. Thank you guys so much. Hopefully, this was good. I will hand it over to. You want to do it, Abuna, or should I do it? I just want to highlight that today's Abuna's birthday. Happy birthday, Abuna. We love you. Now the flood of text messages and the birthday love is going to come through. We love you, Abuna. Sorry, how could we forget such an important detail? Aww.
Thank you for the well wishes. Um, I just some announcements. Tomorrow we are launching or kickstarting the SMSM Ladies Book Club, but it's not just for SMSM ladies; it's for every female that's out there. But Emily can speak to us more of the book, of what is expected, and the dates, or how it's going to be scheduled in the coming days. So Emily, please speak to us about it.
Okay, hi everyone. So yes, we're starting the ladies book club tomorrow. We're reading "Remember Thy First Love" by Archimandrite Zachariah Zacharu. Is that right? Every time I say it, I laugh. Sorry, everyone who's listening to this. Yeah. So the first part tomorrow. If it's not too late, you can get it on Kindle like right now. Yeah, it's at 7 p.m. tomorrow. Yeah, well, I mean Egyptian timing, but 7 p.m. please. So we're gonna read Foundations tomorrow, which is like around 40 pages. You can get the book on Kindle right now and then read it on like an app, not even a Kindle ebook if you want. And then it's also available in paperback on Amazon. So we're meeting tomorrow the 12th, and then it's gonna be every other Friday. So the 26th of July, August 9th, August 23rd, and September 6th. And yes, all women everywhere are welcome.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. This coming tomorrow, actually, I should have went chronological, but tomorrow, 6 a.m., we're going to celebrate the Feast of the Apostles. The Feast of the Apostles is also one of 3 times that we pray the Liturgy of the Water. And the Liturgy of the Water is where we call on the Holy Spirit, on the Holy Trinity to come and dwell and consecrate this water that is before us. It is used for healing, for cleansing, for purification. Um, and it's really a blessed prayer. There's also the washing of the feet, and it is followed by the Divine Liturgy to celebrate the Feast of the Apostles or the martyrdom of Peter and Paul. This will be tomorrow. We start at 6 a.m., and I'm hoping to wrap up by 9 a.m. But the oddball here is the Liturgy of the Water, so that it's going to probably be by 9 a.m., if not 9:30 at most. This coming Saturday, come for Vespers, Sunday, of course, Liturgy, and then Monday we continue with the theme for the summer, which is Summer of Psalms, and that's going to be also a great and wonderful talk. Last Monday, we had a workshop in which we had different groups put together psalms that really incorporated the different aspects of prayer life. It was thanksgiving, it was glorification, it was lamentation, it was supplication, it was intercession for oneself and for others. And really, every group did such a fantastic job, and it was really powerful and beautiful to hear these prayers that were, again, modern day, but at the same time, just very wonderful to hear and to pray out. Also, we announced our Paris trip. Our Paris trip is going to be from December 20th. We depart from here, and we return December 30th. If you're interested to register or to learn more about it, you can reach out to Sharif Barsoom. You could also register at travels.smsm.nyc. This will not just be Paris, it will be Paris and surrounding cities throughout, but we're mainly going to stay at a hotel in Paris in the Opera area. Also, ECCYC College registration is still open. If you're in college, you can go to eccyc.org or ECC. I forget the actual address. It shifted a little bit, but I think eccyc.org. Oh, yeah, college.eccyc.org. And you can register there, or if you know an undergrad that is interested, they can register there. This year, it's actually going to be out in Woodbury, Long Island. It starts at the church, but then it will be at a hotel that is local. So registration will be at the church, followed by the rest of the weekend being at the hotel, meeting room, and everything else. Trying to remember if there's more announcements. I'm sure there is, but I'm blanking out. Yes, you can get all our announcements at links.smsm.nyc. You can join our WhatsApp groups or follow us on social media, Instagram, Facebook, etc., YouTube. And this talk tonight, as well as every talk that we have, can be found streamed live, or you can listen to it anytime after that. Again, our handle is smsm.nyc. SMSMNYC is the handle. And that's it. We can stand up for prayer, please. But I could send you the prayers that were put together. Yeah, sure. Sure. Just message me so I could respond. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God, amen. O Lord, make us worthy to pray thankfully. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not to temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. In Christ Jesus our Lord, for thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Amen. The love of God the Father, the grace of his only begotten Son, Jesus Christ our Lord, and the fellowship and the gift of the Holy Spirit be with you all. You may go in peace. The peace of the Lord be with you all.